This time, it's my real pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. This gentleman has been touted as President Obama's favorite chef. We were sitting there having lunch today, and he wasn't sure if I should say that or not, because he wasn't sure quite what the response from the crowd would be for that. But nonetheless, it's certainly an honor. He's also the owner and executive chef of Spiaggia's restaurant in Chicago, the owner and executive chef of Mangia's Trattoria here in Kenosha, and many of us know him as a contestant in Top Chef Masters on Bravo TV. So certainly he's had an interesting life as a chef, and I'd like to introduce Chef Tony Mantuano. Chef.
Hello. How many of you are friends of Top Chef Masters? Fans of Top Chef Masters? So, first of all, I'd like to thank Lou and the Chamber of Commerce for inviting me here today to speak. But the reason I bring up the Top Chef Masters first is maybe it's the first time some of you have been aware of me or knew who I was, but it's been a 30-year career to get to that point of being on television on Bravo, and I had no idea how popular the show was, but the response has been great, and it's been difficult to walk down the street these days, which again I had no idea was going to be this popular. But it all started in Kenosha, and I grew up in Kenosha. I went to McKinley, I went to Tremper High School. My grandparents had a grocery store on the Mantuano Food Shop on 21st. How many of you remember the Mantuano Food Shop? If you do, you're probably older. Thank you. But growing up there and having that passion for what they did in the grocery store, it was truly a mom and pop grocery store, because it was my grandmother in the front and my grandfather in the back. And their attention to detail and their customer service is why that store lasted as long as it did. And then it didn't stop there, because after the store closed at night, there was my grandfather's garden, which at the time as a young boy, when you would look up at these vegetables and these vegetable plants and see how big they were, and he had a method to his madness, and he had an attention to detail. He would save the seeds from the previous year to plant only the strongest and the biggest plants for the following year. I didn't really know what his secret was until I looked into one of the watering buckets that he used, and noticed that it was filled with something that he referred to as chicken manure. But I'm not afraid to admit where I come from. I remember hearing stories about people like Orson Welles, who would always say, they would never say that they were from Kenosha, but you are who you are. And I enjoyed growing up in Kenosha. It was a great place to grow up. Growing up in the 60s, I know I don't look that old, but growing up in the 60s, with the music program that existed at that time in Kenosha Unified, I mean, being in Rambler Band and being in the high school marching band at Tremper, I mean, we traveled all over the country. Being the drum major of Rambler Band was a great experience as well. Does Rambler Band still exist? It does, right? So that was a great opportunity, and I think, growing up, experiencing that, and growing up with in my grandmother's and my grandfather's grocery store and their home and how she cooked, it was those are the experiences that made me who I am today. It was really a lot to do with Kenosha that made me, and I think when we opened Manja 22 years ago, when my family opened Manja, we wanted to give that same hospitality. We wanted to carry on the legacy of my grandparents, and I guess it's probably true with any business, but for certain in the restaurant business, it's really, food is important, but it's really more important to treat people the right way and to make sure that you recognize people. And the reason people come back to restaurants is because how they were treated. I mean, as a chef, it's hard to admit. I mean, the food has to be good, I understand that, but you know, do the experiment on your own. Ask the person next to you, or when you leave here today, ask any person, what was your last great dining experience? And before they get to anything about the food, more often than not, they're gonna say to you, well, they remembered, when I went there, they remembered the Chianti that I like to drink, they remembered the table that I like to sit at, and that's why people go back. They go back for that aspect of hospitality. And that's what I think we've carried from my grandparents to Manja, and it's the same thing we use and carry at Spiaggia, and Spiaggia's just celebrated its 26th anniversary. And I think that's why we get a lot of celebrities as well at both restaurants. And some of the people that have dined with us over the years at Spiaggia, I mean, the person that most impressed me was when Paul McCartney dined there. And when he came there with his then wife, Heather Mills, they're vegetarians. So they were having a little bit of trouble deciding what to order. And when I spoke with them, they told me different ingredients that they like. They like this kind of mushroom, they like this kind of, apparently they're not a Beatle fan in the crowd here. But they were so down to earth, and having gone to the table and to talk to them and say, what do you like to eat? That was all part of that whole hospitality thing. And we ended up creating a vegetarian menu for them that night that we continued to serve for years after at Spiaggia. And then of course, the Obamas have been coming to Spiaggia since before he was senator. And the last time that they were there, is that me? I'm sorry, am I doing that? No? Ah, okay. Before he was senator, they would come, and the last time that they came was the Saturday after the Tuesday election. And it was an incredible electric atmosphere at that time in the restaurant, and the only people that knew that they were coming that night, when the Secret Service called us, they talked to me, and of course we've known them for years, so it wasn't a surprise to us that they were coming, but it was a Saturday night, and it was quite busy. But I got a call about 2 o'clock in the afternoon from the Secret Service saying, and now I know there's Republicans in the room now. And anyway, the Secret Service told me they were coming, they needed a table, but they said, please, you cannot tell a soul. And of course I couldn't tell anyone, but we had to have a table ready for them. And once they were in the room, it was no longer a secret that, obviously, that they were dining there. So once they were sat, then everyone that entered the restaurant after that had to be security wanded. And for some reason, when they left, there must have been about 200 or 300 people outside the restaurant waiting to see them. And then, of course, people started emailing and texting people that were in the restaurant dining to their friends to come and see them exit. So that was a great experience. They always came only on a date night. They never came with their children. I mean, a date night was them and 30 Secret Service people.